Hey, I'm Tony Soares, and I'm going to be showing you how to make a Pookie bowl today over an old hubcap that I found alongside the road. Don't know what car it went to, but this will be a new Pookie form, and it'll have a flat bottom, so when you're using your Pookie on the table, it doesn't wobble side to side. Pretty easy to do. We're going to be using some Hydro-Cal FGR gypsum cement. It's just like plaster of Paris, but it's a lot harder. It's more like a kind of a cementy plaster of Paris. I've leveled up the table, all this stuff. Uh, Make sure that we're pretty square. Bucket, soapy water, some clay, and I do have some different forms that I've used for making all kinds of different Pookies, giant Pookies. This is a huge soup bowl made out of aluminum. Some woks. These are pretty big woks. I think it's about 15 inches across. Kind of a regular size wok, a little wok, and then this big wok, I believe it's 28 or 32 inches across. And get that supply restaurant supply places. But anyways, so we'll get to making a bowl here today. All right, so I've put a little bit of water in this bucket, and I'm gonna put some of this plaster in there. Not good to breathe this stuff, so try to do it outside or with the wind blowing, or put a fan on so you don't breathe it. It'll set up in your lungs just like it does right here on the form. Put a mask on. This stuff takes about 25 or 30 minutes to set. You always want to make sure you have enough. If you have too little, you run out. So when it starts to stack up on top of the water, that's when it's about right. They have all kinds of mixing instructions, but this is how I do it. And I'll let it sit for a little while and degas. Move that off the side. And once it starts to degas, we'll stir it and then let it sit for a while, and then this stuff starts to warm up. I did use some warm water so it goes a little faster. What I'm going to do is spray the form. Get a little more focus here. So I'm going to spray this whole area. Plaster sticks to everything, so you want to make sure you put soapy water as a release. And then I'm going to take some clay, and I want to anchor this hubcap to the table. That way it doesn't move around. So you smear that clay on there real good. See if that just a little bit more. You want this thing to almost teeter-totter right on top. So that should hold it fairly well. And along the edge here, it has a funny little lip. So I want to get rid of that little lip area. Otherwise, you'll never be able to get the hubcap off. So what I'm going to do is take some clay. Probably should have made a real fine little coil. I'll just press that in there. And kind of wipe it. And it might be a little bit of a struggle to get this hubcap out, but shouldn't be too bad. Got to be careful of the undercuts when you're making forms. I've recently upgraded and got a microphone for my iPhone, so you can probably hear me better. A lot of folks always complain they can't hear me talking on this. Hopefully I'm not breathing like Darth Vader on here. Alright, so that should be good. And whatever's left over on the casting part, you could always sand it down. Any imperfections. And what I'm going to do right now is make a flat spot on the bottom of this hubcap to be the flat base of the form. So I'll set that right there. And you want kind of a wider bottom. If they're too narrow, then your form tends to rock back and forth, so they're kind of not good when they're like that. I'm gonna just smear this on there, and hopefully you get it pretty centered. That's the trick. I may go get a paddle real quick and paddle that. And if it looks a little on the skinny side or thin side, I'm gonna maybe make a little extra ring there for it to widen it out a little bit more. You can almost do anything with clay. So you want to smear that real good so you don't have any imperfections in your form. Once it's cast, it's pretty much in there, but you can do some sanding, like I said, to fix it. Depth check there. All right, so that's pretty good. And now I'm going to build the well. You can see this already wanting to move a little bit. So the well is a long coil of clay, and I usually put it about 1 inch away for making these type of puki form makers. If I'm going to make just a puki bowl out of plaster, which I don't do that too much anymore because plaster, it always tends to crack, or they, when you're working with them, they put off a little bit of dust while they're spinning on the table. So that's why I started using these Hydrocal forms, and then which are made of plaster. But then all I'm doing is putting a clay slab in them and making a ceramic form, which lasts longer. You don't have to worry about them freezing in the wintertime and warming up in the summertime and getting all kinds of cracks like plaster does. So this well here that I'm building kind of lets me know where the form is and where the plaster is floating out over when I start dumping the plaster on this table. This is just something I developed years ago. Thought I'd share it. Pretty simple process. Once you get one or two of these things, you can cast forms all day long, or 5 or 10 of them, however you want to do it. So I like to make this kind of high and raised, and you want to smear it onto that table so it sticks for at least 20 or 30 minutes. Otherwise, this well, or you could also call it a dam, maybe it's a dam, but you don't want it to break while you're in the middle of your casting process. And I might check it one more time right before I pour the plaster on. All right, I'm gonna check on the plaster. Okay, so just gonna stir this plaster. It's been about 5 or 10 minutes. Still pretty liquidy. And you should set a timer for this for at least 20 minutes or 15 to 20 minutes, depending on what plaster you use. The plaster of Paris sets up really quick, especially with warm water. Hydrocal takes maybe like 30 minutes, but once it starts to set, it's on. You can't mess with it. It will set up within a minute or two. Okay, so this is where I lost connection with my microphone, so I'll be doing some voiceover here throughout the rest of the video, parts of the video. So we're going to level up, make sure the bottom is level. My grandma always said, good enough for crane work. We're not building watches here. Got this plaster kind of stirred up. Gonna spray it once more with mold release soap. You can get it from the ceramic supply, or you could just use a lot of dish soap and some water and just spray it on there. It keeps the plaster from sticking. I'm going to start by pouring a little bit of plaster on the form just to kind of see where it's at, make sure the surface gets all covered. This plaster took a really long time to set up. I think it was like 45 minutes before it set up. If you're going to use the Hydrocal, be prepared to wait. The gypsum 20-minute casting plaster, which you can get at Home Depot, tends to set up real quick. It's just a softer plaster, and the forms aren't as hard. They don't last as long, but the Hydrocal does last many years. And for this, what we're doing here, you can make a number of forms and have 20 or 30 of them laying around, no problem at all. And you could probably throw away your form making bowl and make a new one if you needed to. So at this point, it's been about 45 minutes and the plaster is really starting to thicken up, so I'm going to start putting it on with my hand there. It starts out a little bit on the runny side, but within just a few minutes here, you'll see how quick it starts to set up. So you got to work fast. Just want to make sure all the area around the dam is full. That way we don't leave low spots in there or holes. Start building it up on the top of the form after a little bit. Do a little patty cake there, just kind of know where your center is and keeping a little bit of a flat spot. You can see how much thicker the plaster has gotten in just 2 or 3 minutes. Just moving it around as quick as I can. Fill in all those low spots and move around the high spots a bit. I'm going to take a soft rib and just smooth over everything on the outside. Plaster can be very sharp and rough. Once it dries, it'll leave little sharp burrs all over the place, so good to knock them down. You can come back in with some sandpaper or Surfoam shaver and take all that stuff, knock all of it down. I've even used an angle grinder with some coarse sandpaper on there to get rid of the heavy stuff, but quite dusty. Best to get everything done while it's still pliable and damp, which only gives you a few minutes. Level up one more time. So now I have my Surfoam shaver. I'll just knock down a few little spots on there. It wasn't too bad after using that rib. It's kind of like a little cheese grater. You can get them at Home Depot. Surfoam shaver. I'm going to start pulling the dam away, the clay dam. Get some room in there for my fingers to get underneath the form to pull it off the table. Stuck on there pretty good. There it goes. Voila. Reuse that chunk of clay. It doesn't have any plaster in it. Pull the hubcap out. Now you can see the clay foot is still in there. That was attached to the hubcap, so remove that, and that'll give you your flat spot for your new form when you make it. What I'll end up doing is sanding this form down. I'm going to shave all this junk off where the dam was. It's quite sharp and abrasive there, so but I'll sand the inside of the bowl and make it nice and smooth. Looks good. All right, so this is one that I've already previously made and works really well. So what I've done is rolled the slab on the slab roller, just kind of formed it over a pot just to give it a little bit of curve, and I'll throw that in there. I did put a little bit of a grog in the form just to help release a little bit better. When I make these, I try to make as many as I can, as quick as I can. So you want to get it, make sure it's pressed in there real well. And then I want to make sure the inside is real round. So this size is good for basketball size pots. And I've made all sorts of pookies, big ones, small ones. The deeper that they get, the harder it is to get your pot out, the bigger the pots are. So got to keep that in mind. I made some really big, very deep pookies, and they're hard to pull the pot out to trim it if you need to trim around the edge. So I just take a rib, smooth that out real good. You could use a round stone in there and kind of smooth it around if you need to. Make sure there's no air bubbles. And take the hacksaw blade. Cut off your excess. Then I like to, you can leave them real smooth, or you can kind of rough them up to let the air flow in between your new pot and the pookie. And that does help release the new pots pretty well. Just using a green scouring pad. But we'll make this one kind of on the smooth side. Just kind of smooth it out. Then I'll let it sit like that for a while. And or have a board with a cloth. Just flip it over and let it dry like that for probably 12 or so hours. Then you can come back in and trim the little lip. Okay, here is a fired form bowl sitting in the form. And I wanted to show you how much the clay shrinks. It's about 1 inch, so make sure you make your forms a little bit bigger than what you're shooting for. They turn out pretty nice. And there is the one that I just made in the previous section. Had it on the board, flipped it over, using the Surfoam shaver to shave the little edge off there. And what I'm doing is creating an inside lip and an outside lip. I like to be able to pinch my clay right against the lip there and not have it form over the outside, making like a muffin top or a line of demarcation or whatever you want to call it. But I just go around and shave it to where it's pretty smooth, and I might hit it with the sponge, and then maybe a rib just to push any of the sand particles in and kind of smooth it up. But this tool works really well for clay that's leather hard. Has a nice flat bottom to it. Pretty clean looking. And here are some pots from Southern California: Salton Sea Buffware, Cahuilla pottery, maybe some Kumeyaay pottery from the Salton Sea area. There's a weird corrugated bowl that may have been traded into the area. I don't know the history. Some cook pots and a puki bowl. Probably was the bottom of a pot at one time. Archaeologists call them parching trays for parching seeds, but almost definitely used for making pottery also. It's a great photo. It's quite a big photo. I just have nowhere to put it anymore, so I keep it in the dome with all my pots, and love this pottery. They're like big giant balloons, paper thin. California made some incredible pottery back in the day. Trying to get it revived. And here are some of my pukis and pots. Big puki. This one has a round bottom on it. I used to make a lot of them with round bottoms because I'd sit on the ground, just dish out a little area in the sand, and the puki bowl sits perfect in there. That's how a lot of the old pots were made back in the day. This is a bowl that had broken in the rim, so I trimmed it down. It has a little bit of a flat spot on the bottom. Works great. Some other ones. There's a form with the fired bowl in it, just to show you the shrinkage rate and how they come out when they're done. Big Hohokam pot, big brownware. My pots are formed over other pots, and then I set them into the puki bowls and finish them off. This is how I make them. Please subscribe to the channel. Thank you.